You're looking not just for the right words, but also the right footage that's appropriate with the words. Individual dairies should be involved in telling their story to their community and can't expect someone else to do that for them. We did an analysis that showed that we were indeed among the most watched dairy content, not just in the United States, but around the world.
Welcome to Holstein Connections, where we share the latest stories, insights, and news from Holstein Association USA and beyond. The largest dairy cattle breed association in the world, Holstein Association USA provides leadership, information, and services to help dairy producers worldwide be successful. Whether you're in the barn, on the road, or just tuning in for your dose of dairy news, we're glad you're here. This is Holstein Connections. Welcome back to the Holstein Connections podcast. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the media side of the Holstein Association. I'm Emily Bosch, Holstein Association USA's Senior Communications Manager, and joining me today is Eric Grant, founder of the Grant Company. I've had the pleasure of working closely with Eric during my 5.5 years with the Holstein Association, and I've learned so much from him. Eric and his team at the Grant Company have truly played an integral role in much of the photography, videography, and media that you see from Holstein. From capturing award-winning moments at the National Holstein Convention to traveling to registered Holstein herds across the country, they've helped shape how Holstein Association USA shares its story. Eric, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Emily.
So, Eric, let's start by learning a little bit more about your story. How did you find your way to working in the ag media world?
Yeah, I started, actually, this is the 40th anniversary of my involvement in ag media. My first job was with the Simmental back in 1986. But my primary focus for the first 15 to 20 years of my career was print and photography. I wrote for Farm Journal out of Philadelphia with both their beef and dairy magazines, Beef Today and Dairy Today. And then in the mid-2000s, with the rise of digital communications, and I don't want to say the collapse of print media, but the diversity of media kind of forced my career to evolve into more digital type communications, particularly video and television. And in the mid-2000s, I joined the American Angus Association and helped to spearhead their efforts evolving into television and launched their YouTube channel and all their social media. Had a lot of success in that realm. We were among the first ag organizations to really aggressively pursue that path. And then in 2017, I left the American Angus Association after a decade with that organization and started Grant Company. And I think the very first person that called me was John Meyer, recently retired CEO of Holstein Association USA. And he was very interested in perhaps developing some of the same things that we had done with Angus. And it was John's vision and desire that really resulted in the platforms we've developed since that time.
Awesome. Yeah, that was going to be my next question, Eric, was to tell me about that phone call you received from John back in the day. So since then, you've grown the Grant Company, and the Holstein Association is certainly not your only customer. So give us a rundown, Eric. What does the Grant Company look like today in 2026?
You know, when we first started in 2017, we were still, I don't want to say primarily, but a big part of our focus was anchoring the communications and advertising efforts that we did with print advertising. We don't do a lot of print design or print advertising development now. That really changed in 2020 during COVID. And what we saw was a lot of these companies that had traditionally gone to trade shows or conventions or meetings shifted their marketing and advertising investment into more digital communications because they couldn't reach their customers otherwise. So we actually grew quite a bit during the COVID period and became much more video centric. Interestingly, though, the work that we had done with Holstein kind of led up to that. And, you know, we started shooting in the summer of 2017 and had visited, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 dairies up to that point, and had a pretty strong digital presence out there. So the association was well prepared at that point to have the materials and the content that it needed to continue to communicate during that rough patch of history. And then on the backside of COVID, we've continued to evolve in that direction. One of the things that we see really is 15, 20 years ago, the model for a video, for instance, would have been 12 to 15 minutes in length. Now we're producing videos that are 12 to 15 seconds in length. And there's more and more appetite for that kind of content. And that creates its own kinds of challenges too, wanting to create content that actually stands out when everybody else has suddenly got into it. So we continue to evolve and develop new ways of sharing stories. And proud to say that this is our 10th year that we're entering in 2016 of sharing the registered Holstein story with the world. One of the things that I really appreciate about what Lindsay Warden and you have done with the communications the last couple of years is that you're allowing it to evolve and to continue to become even more relevant than it was in the past. And that sometimes that takes, it definitely takes courage to do that, to evaluate what you're doing and to see areas of weakness and strength and to be able to move into areas of opportunity. So I really, really appreciate watching you and Lindsay really take hold of the communications work and the programs for the Holstein Association and continue to make what you do even more relevant for your membership as you move forward.
Absolutely. And Eric, I think something that stood out to me, not only in your work with the Holstein Association, but in your entire career in ag media, is your ability to really change with the times and know when it's time to pivot, whether that's from print to doing more digital to the lengths of videos, as you mentioned. What do you think has kept you nimble and able to change with the changing ag media landscape?
Well, it's a little bit like being in the dairy business. I'm in business for myself and, I have to stay relevant or I go out of business. And so the reality is that the media environment has changed, audience have changed. The fact that every person now walks around with an iPhone and can watch video produced by any content producer on the planet today compared to where they were 15, 20 years ago, where that kind of information wasn't accessible. So yeah, it's an everyday thing. It's an everyday struggle and opportunity to remain relevant. And, we're constantly evaluating what other organizations and their companies are doing and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And a lot of it's trial and error, but you do your best. And the one thing that I've learned over the years is that no matter what the length of a video is, or whether short or long as it's good content always carries the day. And if it's good content, people watch it and you'll know pretty quickly if it's marginal quality content. And that theme has stayed the same from the very beginning of my career in ag communications, that a good article carries the day, a well-written story carries the day, one that doesn't carry the day. So you've got to stay focused on the story and focused on the audience and what is relevant to them.
I think that's great perspective and great advice. So, of course, one of the key things that you worked with the Holstein Association on over the years is Holstein America. Last year, we premiered our 15th episode. For listeners who may not know what Holstein America is, it's our documentary TV series where we feature registered Holstein breeders from across the country. Traditionally, we've premiered it on RFD TV. So give our listeners a little bit of an idea, Eric, of the significance of Holstein America in terms of viewership and exposure that has really provided the Holstein Association.
Yeah, so for ag organizations and ag sectors to survive, they have to have a reason for their existence in the eyes of consumers. And we've all heard a 1,000 times that it's so critical for agriculture to tell its story. And so we have this long-standing partnership or relationship with RFT TV, where the hour-long show has aired over the years, plus other content that we've produced, news packages and things like that. But all of the content that we produce for Holstein America also ultimately winds up on YouTube and Facebook and other places. So we're kind of tailor-making that content for people and putting it in places where they can find it and where they like to watch content. But overall, since the beginning, just on YouTube, to give you a sense of the viewership, I would say we're 3.5, 4 million views in its entirety since the beginning, which is a pretty significant audience for the dairy business. Probably at one point here, several years ago, we did an analysis that showed that we were indeed among the most watched dairy content, not just in the United States, but around the world. Facebook, we get hundreds of thousands of views every year. Other platforms, the same thing. And that's combined with what has been a presence on our FTTV that's, given us hundreds of thousands, if not millions of viewers since we started. So it's a very, very big audience. And people when I look at the demographics of the viewership on YouTube in particular, the number of people around the world that are watching this content and expressing their interest in registered Holstein genetics, hopefully it's helping to drive demand and awareness of the breed on a worldwide basis.
Absolutely. I know looking through those comments, you can tell some of the YouTube viewerships are definitely from people in different parts of the world who are really just fascinated by US registered Holsteins and the genetics that we have available here in the United States. So, Eric, in collecting all of this content for Holstein America, your team has traveled to over 100 different registered Holstein breeders. I know you haven't been on every single shoot, but you've certainly been on a lot of them. What stands out to you when you visit these Holstein Association USA's members' farms?
I think what I love about doing the shoots is that in most cases, you not only are there to capture a story of a family or an individual who's raising registered Holsteins, but when you leave, you're also making a new friend, and you walk away from that experience kind of alter the direction of your life a little bit, because you always take something away with you that you remember or that you can apply to your own life. The dairy business, is a challenging industry. It's gone through a lot of structural changes the last several decades, but it's always interesting to me to see the innovation, the drive, and also the commitment to the cattle. And, so what got me into the business initially was my love of livestock. So I love being around cattle. And now as I've grown older, I love being around cattle people more than I love being around cattle, because there's just so much to learn. And every single place that I go to literally changes my life just a little bit. And that's the great benefit of it personally. And then bringing all that videotape home, going through the interviews, going through the footage, and trying to create something that other people want to watch and that they enjoy and that they also benefit from it. That's the real joy of what I do. And there's nothing better than putting together a segment that, literally tens of thousands of people will sit down and watch. And that's a lot of fun.
And when we go on those shoots, we really get a chance to get a little glimpse into those farmers' daily lives. Sometimes we're invited in for breakfast and we're sitting at the table with the family. And oftentimes, Eric, you and your team get there kind of at early in the morning to see what the farmer does throughout their day and captures all of that. And you always do a really nice job bringing that to life and making our viewers feel like they're right there with the farmer too, I think. So, Eric, earlier you mentioned that really the quality of a story and a good story is what carries the communication that we're trying to bring forward, whether it's an article, whether it's a video, or another form of communication. What do you think the key to telling a compelling story is?
I think the key is authenticity. And that is something that the dairy industry has in spades. Dairy people are very, very authentic people. And the public, above and beyond just other dairy farmers that might be interested in learning about that farm, the public is intensely interested in what happens on a dairy. And I think that one of the great things that's happened with Holstein America is that it has an audience that's both dairy centric and also people that are just curious about what happens, on a dairy in Wisconsin somewhere. There's way too much content, I believe, video content in particular, that's too tightly managed from a message standpoint, from a production standpoint. And, when we go to a dairy, a registered Holstein dairy, we don't want them to do anything other than what they normally do on that particular day. We don't want them to dress up. We don't want them to stage anything for us, because audiences really are very sophisticated and they detect those kinds of things. What they really want to see is an authentic family that's committed to raising the best dairy products in the world with the best cattle in the world. And authenticity is key. And, we tend to focus on drawing that as much as out as we possibly can for that reason, because as soon as it becomes inauthentic, people quit watching. That's definitely something I've learned over the years, that the more authentic it is, the better.
So you have all the footage from the farm and you're working on weaving together a story that is going to appeal to both fellow registered Holstein breeders and consumers and carrying that authenticity through. How do you sort through the footage? Because oftentimes the interviews and the content that we get from those members is a lot longer than what we actually have the opportunity to use for a segment.
Yeah, so a typical segment is 4 minutes to 5 minutes in length, and we might do 3, 4 interviews while we're there, and each of the interviews are maybe 20, 25 minutes in length. So there's a lot of time that you spend going through what the individuals say during the interview, and frankly, you get to know folks very, very well when you're sitting with them on your computer for days on end, trying to cut it down to the key sentences and the key parts of the story. But you're looking not just for the right words, but also the right footage that's appropriate with the words, and we tend to, it's a little bit formulaic in how we do our interviews, but we try to do our interviews the way we cut the segments together, which is we start at the beginning, we talk about the middle, the 3 points that are important about the dairy, and then we talk about the future. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so each of those interviews is structured loosely like that, so that you can begin to pull elements in to construct a story. And most stories, begin at the beginning and end at the end. And while that's simple, sometimes that can be very challenging as well.
Absolutely. It's kind of like putting together an outline for a written piece or a speech that you might give, but in video form. So, Eric, of course, something else that you've done with us is help us to successfully cover our National Holstein Convention, which is a big event that requires lots of photos and video interviews and just general coverage. So, what are some of the strategies that you use to successfully cover events, whether it's National Holstein Convention or other events that your team attends to for other clients throughout the year?
Strategies. Now, that's a good question. Well, number one, Holstein Convention is a great event, and we really enjoy going to it every year. The Holstein Horizons thing has been a really great event for bringing some of the more innovative dairy farmers and others into the mix and allowing the membership to hear those things. We try to everything that we do, we try to gather as much information as we can while we're there to make the most efficient use of our time. So, for instance, if we go to a registered Holstein farm, we're not just shooting video and doing interviews. We're also shooting some still photos as well, so that the trip, the investment in time and money to get there, we maximize as much as we possibly can. So there's a lot of things that like if we go to a farm, might wind up in the Pulse or on the website or as a social media graphic, something like that, because we may not get back to that one for several years. The same thought process is with the convention coverage, and Emily, you do a great job of organizing everybody and letting everybody know where we need to be. But we go in with the basic philosophy is that this is a once a year event. Not all the membership is there, and we want to cover the important things that come from the meeting as comprehensively as we can, but also be positioned to share that information with people who weren't able to make it that year.
And Eric, you often use the phrase "hay in the barn" in terms of the content that we've gathered with you over the years. So I know as the communications manager, I definitely appreciate having those photos and videos and interviews on hand to use. There's so many times where I'm doing a project for one thing and I think, oh, we have that from a Holstein America shoot from this year. We have that interview from convention that we can use. So you're right, it definitely pays to try and really maximize the amount of footage and coverage that we can get at one event. So now we're going to take a quick break to learn more from Holstein Association USA.
The countdown is officially on for the 2026 National Holstein Convention in Orlando, Florida, held June 22nd through 25th. Join fellow Holstein enthusiasts from across the country for an event packed with education, networking, youth contests, tours, and unforgettable moments that celebrate the Holstein breed and the people behind it. Registration opens February 16th and will be available through May 20th. New this year, convention attendees can choose from 2 all-inclusive packages to make it simpler to get the whole convention experience. The 2026 convention has something for everyone, so plan ahead by registering early and securing your place at one of the most anticipated Holstein events of the year. Learn more and get ready to register starting February 16th at holsteinconvention.com. We can't wait to welcome you to the 2026 National Holstein Convention in Orlando, Florida.
All right, welcome back. So, Eric, I'm curious if you had to pick the most memorable experience from your time working with the Holstein Association, what would it be and why?
Oh boy, that's a great question. Lots of memories. I have seen a lot of America as a result of my involvement with the Holstein Association. There's little memories like flying a drone and getting it caught in a tree next to a dairy and having to climb the tree to get the drone out. We did that in 2017. I got photos of me way up in the tree, digging that thing out of the limbs. But I think that the thing that this may not be what you're looking for, but the continuous improvement, just in the short period that I've been involved with the Holstein Association, the 10-year span, the immense improvement in the productivity of the cattle. And you see that when you go to these dairies. And the amazing thing that about these registered Holstein dairies is that they all have different markets. They all have different goals. They all have different products that they may or may not be. One person may be baking cheese locally right there. Somebody might have a bottling operation, but they're able to tailor make their genetics thanks to the power of the Holstein Association database. And that is something that always amazes me, how these people are able to make breeding decisions to make the cattle fit what they want to do with their business and their dairy. I can't pick out one dairy that really stands out. They're all different and they're all doing different things. But I think that's the story. That's the story of the success of the breed and the breeders. And every time I go to one, we were just up in Connecticut. This guy's got just a few cows, and his wife is a chocolatier, and she's making chocolates just from milk from specific cows. And then you go to another dairy that's got 1,500, 2,000 cows, and they've got a bottling operation. They have, delivery service in the Kansas City area. I mean, it's the entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well, and it's made possible by that beautiful black and white cow.
So true. Eric, what have you learned from working with the Holstein Association and interacting with Holstein breeders?
What have I learned? I've learned that there is still a lot of room for innovation, improvement, and for people who have a dream to raise that perfect cow. I think every registered Holstein farmer, producer gets up every morning looking forward to that next generation of cows and seeing what those cows can do. So, I started out on the beef side. My first cow was a registered Hereford cow. And I remember that first year that, she had her first calf. And that calf is so representative of and symbolic of not just the future of that particular animal, but your own future. You're tied up in that. And so that is alive and well. And I think the professionalism of U.S. registered breeders is unsurpassed. I mean, these folks get up and they work and they're dreaming about that next calf crop and where they're going to be. And every year the cattle get a little bit better, a little bit more productive. They're doing all the things that the public wants us to do. We're better at environmental stewardship. We're better at productivity, efficiency, all those things. And the quality of what we're producing is better. That's, it's an amazing success story, and one that I think is completely deserving of being told and retold and evolving as audiences and markets evolve as well.
And you certainly do a great job helping us tell that story, Eric. So maybe shifting focus a little bit here to what we can learn from you and your many years working in ag media. How has your approach to content changed over the years that you've spent in the ag media space? And then how have you applied that to your work with Holstein Association USA over the past 10 or so years?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, good content carries the day, and any organization or farm or whatever, a company that in order to advance their own exposure to a marketplace or to an audience, they really have to be focused on good, authentic stories more than anything else. Storytelling has been critical to everything from the Bible forward, and so I think that is central. We're evolving with Holstein America this year. We're moving more into a commitment of sharing this content on social media platforms than we have in the past. And that's a reflection of, measuring things and watching things and paying attention to how audiences are watching what you create. And I think we have a great opportunity here to share that story with more and more people in different ways. Part of it's shortening up some of our segments a little bit, maybe cutting them down into smaller, more bite-sized pieces. When we started, I would say our segments are probably longer than they need to be today. But, again, if it's good content, people will hang with it. In print, everybody always asks me, what's the future of print? And print's the same kind of formula. You have the magazine, the Pulse, and it's been a very successful publication for a lot of years. And it's the same kind of thing as video or good advertising. If it's done well and if it's interesting, has information that's relevant to an audience, it will succeed, and it doesn't really matter what the platform is. But that doesn't mean you don't evolve in other areas and keep your eye on what audiences are doing with the content. That's the key, is understanding what they are looking for and making sure you provide it to them.
And I think one of the opportunities and challenges of working in ag media in 2026 is that there are a wide variety of people, especially members of the Holstein Association. They can be anywhere from our junior members and teenagers all the way up to farmers that are nearing the end of their career, and they're all consuming content in different ways, right? So I think it's important to try and put the content out there in different ways so that our entire target audience is able to consume and take in the content in a way that they enjoy most. Hence the podcast that we're on today. So, Eric, what would your thoughts on trying to stay relevant in different types of platforms be?
Yeah, I think as the media environment has changed the last 10 to 15 years, I think the lessons of the Holstein Association apply to an individual farm or other organizations in ag or even a publishing company. But you really have to be in much more control of your messaging and your own story. You can't expect someone else to carry that for you. So much of what we did in the past was, you had a PR person and they worked the media. They would pitch stories to the media for them to write the story or to produce the content. And, a lot of these publishing companies, media companies, they're pretty stretched thin. And not as many pages there used to be, not as many folks that work for those companies there used to be. So as you evolve into the future, you've really got to be in control of your own destiny when it comes to information and what you put out there. And it applies to individual dairies. They should be involved in telling their story to their community and so on and so forth, and can't expect someone else to do that for them. Because if somebody else does that for them, chances are pretty good that it might be a negative story, and so you have to fill the void preemptively with good, positive content about yourself, and that pays dividends in capitalizing your own stance within your community or your state or the country, and building goodwill for what you do. And an audience has a lot of value too. There may be a dairy out there thinking about getting into bottling or some form of, direct farm to consumer type product. And if you have a story and it's continuously told and it's very positive, you develop a following, that's something that you can leverage into those kinds of opportunities. So storytelling's key. and being yourself is key. But making a sustained effort over time is critical. You can't just do it one time and expect to have an audience. You got to feed it over time and build it and keep going.
Yeah, it builds and builds and builds. I mean, if you look at our YouTube channel, the amount of videos and content that was on it from where I started 5.5 years ago or so to how much we've built with you and your team on our YouTube channel or our social media content over the years, there's hundreds of stories out there. And to your point, if we have members who want to know, well, how has this person started their bottling business or used genomics on their registered Holstein herd, our YouTube channel alone is a great source of information and learning for them. And the good news is I think it's easier than ever to tell your story now with cell phones these days and the amount of media. Eric, how have you seen different technology advancements, whether it's improvements in equipment or AI or things like that? How have you seen it, or how do you see it really shaping the media space going forward?
Yeah, well, somebody with an iPhone can oftentimes generate a very, very, very large audience. So, the iPhones or the smartphones, I mean, gosh, they really an inexpensive way to get things that used to cost thousands and thousands of dollars. I remember, our first video camera, I think, was probably about $60,000-$70,000 camera back in the 90s. And
Wow.
now everybody's walking around with these phones in their pockets, and they can capture just as good a footage as we were back then. So I would never dismiss the idea of just shooting things on an iPhone, because I think it goes back to what I said earlier about authenticity. People like to really see authentic things on dairies, sharing the story of your farm, of your family, and also specific cows. All those kinds of things can really build an audience and opportunity for you, and relationships that may take you places you don't expect. We've kind of seen the same thing. We've invested here the last year in some little higher end equipment than what we've been using, but the technology keeps getting better and less expensive. So it's hopeful for all of us that we have access to great equipment moving forward, because we do so much broadcast. We have a little higher end stuff than what most dairies or organizations would need, but it's very, very accessible. And gosh, within a few seconds, you can reach the whole world with just a quick 15-second video about your farm. It's really, really crazy what you can do nowadays.
Absolutely. Eric, something else that I think you're really good at is fostering that next generation of communicators. I know you've had quite a few interns there at the Grant Company over the years, and you've worked with a number of young professionals, including myself. What advice would you give to youth, maybe some of our junior members or other young professionals who are interested in pursuing ag media for their career?
Yeah, so I think one of the really, really great things that the Holstein Association does is develop young leaders. And it's always exciting for me to see, what these, I don't want to say kids, but students, what's the word? What's the word I should use here, Emily?
Young adults, young
young
professionals,
adults.
yeah.
The media environment is wide open, and it is constantly evolving. I think a lot of it is about doing the small things right. And by that, I remember the first time I met you, Emily, we were unpacking camera bags and packing camera bags,
Yes.
and focusing on just packing the bag the same way that you pack it every time. So that, you lose a microphone clip, or you lose a lens or a lens cap or a battery. Those kinds of little things can really cost a person in the formative stages of their career. As crazy as that sounds, being focused on the little things, showing up on time, showing up early, and showing your commitment to an employer that you're interested and you have the desire to do it. And a lot of the work that we do, quite honestly, is hard work. We travel to 150 locations a year around the country, and it's carrying bags through airports and getting through security and cold weather and hot weather and all those kinds of things. It's more than just quote unquote a career in ag media. It's understanding that you got to do a lot of little things right. And if you're working for a national organization, a national media outlet, there's going to be a lot of travel, and you have to do a lot of things right there as well. The third thing, and this has kind of become something I've started thinking is more and more important for A lot of the ag media people that I see coming out of college don't get a lot of exposure to just storytelling. And I think it's good for students in college to maybe take a class outside of ag in literature or maybe, cinema or something that gives them a little exposure to understand how plot and how the masters put together stories and understanding how that might apply to what they want to do. And then a fourth area is that it's an understanding that it's always about the audience. It's never about yourself. And when you understand that it's about making what you create be a reflection of the people that are watching it, that's the key to good viewership and a long and successful career in ag communications.
Those are the really great points, Eric. And I think especially one or two really apply to any career that you're going to have, whether it's dairy farming or working in ag media or doing something else. How do you understand the audience and how do you apply that when you are crafting that story?
Yeah, that's where the art of it, well, both the art and science of this converges. I mean, on the one hand, you'll see videos do really, really well, and you say, gosh, that worked. Sometimes that's not the best gauge. Sometimes it's just, the more the art side, which is, in your heart if it's a good story or not, And sometimes you kind of go, sometimes you're wrong about that too. So, yeah, it's a combination of data and it's a combination about how you feel. And when we shoot something, one of the things we really work on is trying to shoot things that give you the footage that you need to be able to cover the beginning and the middle and the end. What does the beginning of a story look like? Is it a light being flipped on, in a dairy and it's pitch black and snow's coming down? Or is it that the end? Is it the light being switched off, And so you're constantly kind of looking for those kinds of elements. And that's why I go back to my point about understanding the elements of story and what those things look like, because it's not just going out and shooting cows or not just going out and shooting, a farmer feeding his cows or milking his cows or whatever it is that they're doing. It's trying to tie those elements into a specific part of the story so that you have a story that actually makes sense.
And those elements are really what I think can bring something from good to great too when you're looking at the finished product.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Eric, is there anything else we didn't cover? Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, speaking on behalf of my crew, particularly Jenna McCrell, who's, worked with us. She actually came over with me from the Angus Association. And the lines between Grant Company and Holstein Association are pretty blurred. We see ourselves as being part of the Holstein Association, and not Grant Company. And when we come to the convention or we go to a dairy, we are members of the Holstein Association team. And the Holstein community has been so welcoming to us, and they're such good people, and it's such a great industry, and we've really been proud to be a part of it.
Well, both the Holstein Association team in the office and the members out in the field are very fortunate to have you and Jenna and the rest of the crew, and we're very thankful for all that you've done for us as well, Eric. So before we wrap up our conversation today, I think to get to know you even better, it would be fun to do 5 would you rather type questions. So this is going to be rapid fire. I'll ask them and you can give me your response, Eric. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, Eric, Facebook or Instagram?
Facebook. Showing my age. Yeah.
I thought you might say that. Would you rather fly or drive to a shoot?
Drive.
Would you rather travel east or west to a National Holstein convention?
I'll say west because I grew up in the West.
All right. Barn cat or farm dog?
Oh, dog, definitely.
And then cheddar or mozzarella cheese?
Mozzarella.
Mozzarella. I like it. All right. Well, that's what I have for you. I think I knew 4 out of the 5 of those were what you thought. So I must know you pretty well, Eric.
What was the one that you missed?
I didn't know what type of cheese you were going to pick, but
yeah,
I
like
knew
Italian food, so mozzarella is great. Yep.
There we go. Eric, thank you for joining me today, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in to this episode of Holstein Connections. Don't forget, new episodes drop every other Thursday.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Holstein Connections. Whether you're in the barn, on the road, or just tuning in for your dose of dairy news, we're glad you're here. Until next time, this is Holstein Connections.